Good morning, everyone. My name is Grant Swartzwelder, President of OTA Compression, OTA Environmental, and ChemArt. On behalf of that collection of companies and the Permian Basin Petroleum Association, really appreciate you attending our 19th Oilfield Strong webinar. So for the 19th, because that's such a special number, we have a special speaker today. But do want to remind everybody of a couple of things. One, we will not have a webinar next week because the Permian Basin Petroleum Association's annual meeting will be next week, and so they'll be preoccupied with that. So if you are interested in sponsoring or attending that, please reach out to the PBPA. Secondly, if you miss any of our previous presentations, or if you want to listen to Chuck second and third time, go to YouTube and source OTA compression, and you'll find our YouTube channel on that. So with that, in a way, I was going to say to the person that needs no introduction and then just drop it there, but that joke's been used before. But Chuck and I have been friends for many years. Appreciate him coming on. Obviously, an influential person within the private equity space as he grew Kane Anderson to be one of the larger and successful private equity groups focused on oil and gas. So look forward to hearing your views on quite a few things. So I'm going to start off with that real general puffball question of kind of where do you think the oil industry is going, and how do we get there?
So first off, I was thinking of the famous 19s in Dallas Cowboy history. Am I Bernie Kosar? Is that? I think so. There we go. And Bernie Kosar.
Well, sorry, I should have waited till, or had you as number 12 or something, but it is what it is.
It's all good. So future of private equity energy, what you think is going to happen?
Sure.
You know, it was interesting. If you kind of think back about this industry, let's go ahead and give credit where credit's due. I mean, Ken Hirsch and David Albans created this. And when they were fundraising back, call it, the mid to late 90s, they would walk into an institution, an endowment, a pension fund, and they'd say, we do private equity in oil and gas. And they would go talk to a person that was in charge of private capital for that institution. And maybe the meeting before them was LBOs, buyouts, it was venture capital, but basically private capital was a bucket. And so they would go in there and say, hey, here's why energy is really cool. Here's why you should do it. A lot of educating on energy. So based on their success, NCAP success, quantum success, Kane's success, you get to about the mid 2000s, you've got the shale revolution happening in natural gas. Thoughts are it's going to transition to oil. Institutions said, wow, we need an allocation. We need 10% of our portfolio in energy or real assets. And then when you went in, you fundraised, you walked in and you're talking to a knowledgeable energy person. And you're not talking about why is energy good or bad. You're talking about, well, why you versus quantum versus NCAP. It was very much a different pitch. You didn't really have to do the sales job because you had a special allocation in each one of these. Over the last 2 to 3 years, just, given, I'm sure we're going to talk about ESG. I'm sure we're going to talk about what I'll call the losses in the industry. The last 10 years just hasn't been very good in terms of track record for the industry as a whole. Those allocations have been cut back. They're gone. I mean, 2 or 3 years from now, they're going to be all gone. So the future of private equity in energy is back to the beginning. I mean, you're going to walk into the private capital bucket, you're going to talk to that person, he or she, and you're going to say, hey, here's why energy is attractive. Here's why we can make returns. And they're going to go, okay, stick your pitch book right next to the buyout pitch book, right next to venture, right next to these other private things we do. So I think that's going to be the big change, and that's where you're going to have to adapt as private equity energy. If you want to keep raising money, you're going to have to make the compelling story against every other asset class out there versus just, hey, I'm better than those other guys.
Well, that seems like, given our current environment, that's going to be very tough to make that comparison. So what does that mean for the existing private equity groups? I know you've got a lot of friends in all these various private equity companies, but what happens? They just fold?
I think it's going to be much more what happens to the industry and what's the opportunity set. I mean, we could look into our crystal ball, and if I told you 12 months from now, oil's at 85 because we've underinvested, decline rates in the United States, we get a vaccine, GDP worldwide's growing, wouldn't shock you. And under that scenario, are there going to be great opportunities in oil and gas? Sure. We could also be sitting here 18 months from now, having suffered through 18 more months of COVID type worldwide recession. We could still have oil in the 30s, and it could be tough to raise money. So, I mean, I think ultimately what happens to these institutions, these private equity funds, is going to be pretty macro in nature, and being able to create the compelling opportunity for folks.
But do they have to wait till that oil price gets to 60 plus or 70 plus to go raise money, and so that they can show, or are they able to? Do you think you can go out and say, look, let's take advantage of these low prices and all the challenges in the industry to buy up things on the cheap and go raise money that way?
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly the pitch today, right?
Sure.
If you're going we're at the bottom, a lot of opportunities. Flip side to that is, well, if it's so great, how come deals aren't getting done? And the like, and we can get into the whole discussion on, if you own an oil and gas asset today, why would you sell it? I mean, if you're going to take the money, give it to the bank, why would you do that? If you're going to get the money and not have to give it to the bank, what are you going to do with that money? There's nothing really to go drill, kind of at, call it $35 to $40 oil. So nothing's moving there. So you can kind of punch holes in that story too. But, at the end of the day, I hate to sound like kind of Sesame Street, but, nothing cures low oil prices like low oil prices. Nothing cures high oil prices like high oil prices. It's a cycle. We may be in a down cycle. Us as the United States probably put a cap on oil prices worldwide. I will say this, though. Something's happening right now that I think is a really big deal. And I totally and shamelessly stole this line from Tommy Noose at Oasis, so I've got to give him credit. But we really are transitioning from the age of the driller, where we were providing the marginal barrel of oil to the world. We were doing it with U.S. shale and the like, to boom, COVID. We take, worldwide, we've taken 15 million barrels a day of production offline. I don't even know if oil demand is growing right now. Who knows on that? It's obviously going to be GDP driven, but just given the fact that OPEC can turn on 10 million barrels tomorrow if they want, I mean, even if we grow demand 1 million, 1.5 million barrels a day going forward, you got a lot of time there where we just don't need to supply any more oil. So I think what that's doing is that's transitioning us to a world where the United States is going to produce out, and literally the most important person in each oil and gas company is going to be the production engineer, i.e. the plumber. And so given that we're making that pretty dramatic shift, I mean, almost as big as the shale revolution itself, we're shifting there. What happens when you're producing out? You're a low margin business, right? Dollars and cents and pennies, they actually now matter. So I think kind of this transformation we're going to see as we go into the age of the plumber. And I hate to say this from the humanity side of it, but what did we all learn in business school week number 1? Low margin businesses, got to get rid of people, got to automate. And so if you look at kind of the history of our industry, whenever we spend money on technology, we do it better than anyone on the planet. I will put drilling a 3-mile horizontal well with a 98 stage frac. I'll put that technology up against anything they're doing in Silicon Valley, right? I mean, it is high tech. At the same time, we're still keeping our books in a general ledger with pencil and paper. We still fax in field reports. I mean, we still send the pumper by a tank and they stick a broom handle down in the tank, measure it, call the field off and say 2 feet 7 inches. They do the calculations. That means we produced 12 barrels yesterday. No ability to look well by well and understand the true cost and the like. So all of that stuff's got to get dealt with. And I think that's going to be this big transformation we're going to see. Because the other thing, and this is again unfortunate, I hate this for the humanity of our business, but the people that are getting let go now are older people, and the younger people that are sticking around in the industry taking these jobs, they do everything off an iPhone now. So I think I always hated it when a management team would walk in to my office and go, this time it's different, because it never was. I think this time it really is different. There's going to be this big transformation. And I know I've been long-winded in talking, but it comes back to your point. I think if you can successfully make that transition, man, that may be a compelling story to go to investors with. I mean, it's interesting if you look back to 99, and I'm stealing this from a Wells Fargo research report from about 6 or 9 months ago, so I may get the details wrong, but if you look back to 99, that was the year that tobacco became persona non grata. Literally, you could, if you were an institution, you could not buy tobacco stocks. Well, from 99 to 2020, what was the best asset class in terms of performance? It was tobacco. They were up 10x. Now, this is pre-COVID, so I don't know what's happened since, but they were up 10x because low margin business, automated, cut costs, and distributed cash back to shareholders. And so, you know, yeah, oil going to 85 maybe gives us an opportunity to go raise money. Being able to walk in and say, hey, I'm generating a 10x over over a 20-year period, except obviously you'd be more immediate than that. Here's how I'm going to get you cash out. That's what I think we're seeing. We're seeing the advent of the age of the plumber.
When you talk about technology, you gave an example where it was, the technology involved in drilling a 3-mile lateral is amazing, but there seems to generally be such a resistance to technology in the oil industry. So you think the main driver there is just that simply the low margins is going to bust through that wall, which makes sense in general, but I think we've both seen enough in the industry where the resistance to that has always been pretty high.
And it was interesting. I was talking to a company last night, and this is why I think it's different. I mean, if you go back to 1859, Titusville, Colonel Drake drilling the well, hitting oil, literally from that moment to maybe 2 years ago, 18 months ago, certainly post-COVID, up until that point, we were always a lottery ticket business, right? I mean, oil could triple in prices, you're rich. You could drill a big well, find a new field, boom. You could have a bunch of crappy gas wells, and all of a sudden there's the Haynesville underneath you, and you're just rich. We were always this lottery ticket business. And what do you do when you have a lottery ticket? You spend money if you can go get more lottery tickets, like 3D seismic back in the end of the 90s. Man, I can image these structures no one's ever seen. I drill, I find 20 million barrels of oil. Man, that's a lottery ticket. I'll spend money to go get more lottery tickets. Does automating my land files so that they're not a bunch of paper stacked over in the corner, does that get me another lottery ticket? No. So you don't do it. Same thing with drilling, like we were talking about the 3-mile horizontal. Man, that's a lottery ticket. I go throw 1,000 more pounds of sand into the frac, boom, IP rates are up 45%. Another lottery ticket, right? So we'll spend money when we can get more lottery tickets, but you're right, everything else, I mean, the DMV would be embarrassed to have the level of technology of a back office of oil and gas companies. And why it's different this time, there is no more lottery ticket. There just isn't. I mean, right, wrong, or indifferent, the world believes that oil is capped at 60 for forever. Now, you and I may disagree with that. We may think different, but that's what the world believes. Name a basin that has not been blasted with a slick water modern frac. We've hit it all in the United States. There's literally not a formation left we haven't hit. And if you really look back, and I'm going to get this data wrong too again because it's a little bit dated, but if you look back to 2014, 2015, 2016, and you look at the increase in IP30s, up 30%, up 40% every year, it was up 18% in 2018. But what was interesting about that is that was really the effect of Chevron and Exxon drilling in the Permian on acreage they had had forever. They were just latecomers to the game. And if you took their well results out, basically 2018 was flat. So, there is no more magic technology sitting there to give us a lottery ticket. So the reason I think this time is different is the lottery ticket's gone. And you just have to do these things, automate these things for survival. And the one thing, I hate to disparage E&P management teams, but the one thing they're really good at is keeping their job, right? And so to keep their job, they're going to have to do this. There was somebody on Twitter, and I need to give credit to who it is, but I can't remember, actually has created a metric of CEO per barrels produced in the United States and claims that that's at its all-time high ratio or whatever, and tracks that metric. So yeah, I think the lottery ticket game is now gone, and that's the difference.
Now, onto that discussion, overlay the size of the company and discussion of that, because these larger companies have the IT, have the technology, they have the capital and the diversification, but a lot of times don't have the efficiencies, and they have the extra people and all, versus the smaller company. And we had a webinar a couple weeks ago with a couple of CEOs of small cap companies talking about, is there a role for small cap, public or small cap, in the industry, in the energy industry? And they believe it is because of their efficiencies and their innovation. How do you come out on that as to, because the people that are drilling right now are typically the larger companies, because access to capital is pretty tough for the smaller guy.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. It's something I know every private equity firm has wrestled with. I know that before I was shown the door, we were wrestling with it. Is bigger really better? I mean, you can certainly make a case for back office and consolidating and digitizing all the information, and yes, you're more efficient, and yes, you cut G&A, but do you lose the knowledge of a certain field that may cause production to be 5% less one month than if you had the real expert there that you got rid of? And so that's not an easy question to really answer. And I think it's going to be much more situational, anecdotal. In this case, yes, the small team needs to handle this water flood because you've got to baby it with care, right? Where, a gazillion gas wells pick a basin, probably that's better back office consolidation, et cetera. So that's a question there's no right answer to. But you could defend probably all the points of view on that one.
Go back to the comment you were making about transactions, and why aren't there more transactions? And let's put our psychic hat on how this is going to play out, because you have borrowing base redeterminations coming up. You have a lack of capital. You have a lot of debt, bonds coming due. It has a making for a lot of transactions. Is that what you see, or how's this going to play out?
Well, it's interesting because, that's certainly the perception and all, but if you really think about it, why, if you own an oil and gas asset today, would you sell it? There's at least a shot prices go up. Do you need a use of proceeds if you just give it to the bank? Kind of like what we were talking about. And so I don't know what the catalyst is to make that happen so that transactions actually do happen. Because if you're the banks, I know there's been a lot of talk that the banks are going to come take these assets back. And I've never been a commercial banker. I don't pretend to know what commercial banks are thinking, but I just can't imagine under a Biden administration that if I'm a large bank, I want to go sit in front of the banking subcommittee in the House and AOC is chairing it. And not only are you evil Wall Street, now you're polluting the world. I mean, I don't think I would want that. So I mean, I guess if the E&P company is wasting a lot of money, not operating efficiently, et cetera, yeah, okay. If I'm the bank, I'll go get the assets back. But if they're operating somewhat efficiently and paying me all the capital back, there are no buyers today, so you can't take the assets back and sell it to people. I just think the banks have to stay at bay. I mean, I may be wrong. I mean, maybe they get really rough on this round of borrowing bases, but I just don't see it. So, when I've kind of thought through, because I've talked to obviously a lot of people, because when you're unemployed, you get to sit around and talk with lots of people. It's actually really nice. But it's interesting. They've all said, how do I get a deal? How do I get a deal? I think the only two things that I've kind of seen out there is it appears that non-op interests are being penalized even more than operated interests when it comes to the bank debt. And so if you're getting 10 cents on the dollar in your borrowing base for your non-op interest, would you potentially sell it for 20 cents on the dollar to the operator? Yeah, you might, because it's not really helping you any. You can take that money. Like I said, there's not a lot of use of proceeds these days, but that might make some sense. I could see potentially non-op stuff being sold to operators, and it's kind of the win-win. You gave me better than what the bank's really giving me credit for. I buy something as the operator cheaper. So I see that, but just the big catalyst to make deals happen, I don't know, man. You got me.
Fair enough. It's well, I know there are packages of non-op assets out there. It just seems like the discount that they're going to have to trade at is, well, and maybe that's true for all energy, but especially the non-op would be at a discount. Have you seen that on the mineral side and royalty side?
Minerals are really interesting. We backed the Haymaker guys, did well with the Haymaker guys. Carl's one of my dearest friends in the world. I will admit to this day, I have absolutely no idea how minerals trade. I have never understood it. I had talked myself to a point where if I bought minerals at PDP PV0, I'll get my money back, and then if drilling happens, that's where I make a return. These things will trade at 2 and 3 times PDP PV0. This is pre-COVID, and I never understood that and just couldn't wrap my arms around it. I haven't seen much kind of post-COVID in the way of mineral transactions. One, because I just haven't wanted to look, but two, the stuff I've seen has been on Twitter, and it still feels like they're trading at stuff beyond what I would think are reasonable type multiples. So you got me on minerals. Minerals to me have just never made any sense. The one interesting thing though is I think what you'll learn about minerals is most of the sellers of minerals are sellers based on their life events as opposed to any sort of industry type trends. I mean, I hate to overgeneralize, but $125 oil, somebody's like, okay, great, I'm going to sell these minerals, we're at a peak. Generally, the sale happens with, oh my gosh, my kid's going to college, I need to finance them going to college. Or gee, my dishwasher broke, I've got to sell some minerals to be able to get a new dishwasher. It's much more kind of life event driven. And so it'd be interesting if we are kind of quote unquote in a recession, now, is that a life event that causes a lot more minerals to change hands?
Well, given that you said you're expecting AOC to be chairman, you've got to have a good opinion about ESG and the whole green movement. It sounds like you were promoting AOC as chairman of that committee, weren't you?
Exactly. Okay. My AOC t-shirt here that I'm wearing under my hoodie. It's interesting about the ESG issue, obviously very topical. I've always said, though, that really what happens to energy companies is we've got two problems. Clearly have the green population. I mean, my 18-year-old son, who lives literally the best life. I want to come back as my 18-year-old son. Off away at college, he's probably leading the protest against hydrocarbons. He's probably out there marching with the sign and all this. And oil has obviously financed his lavish lifestyle. So no question we have this green problem, particularly with younger people who, I always like to joke, they get on their iPhones, they Google search it, and then tweet it out while drinking their Starbucks. So no energy in that. But we have this green problem, but I think the green problem is dwarfed by the red problem. And the red problem is just, as an industry over the last 10 to 12 years, we just haven't made any money. And so I think if we were making a lot of money, the ESG issue would be a lot less. It's interesting because the way private equity works, and I know you know this and the audience knows this, but basically you share the profits in a deal with the management team, and they get higher and higher splits over time. I mean, that's just every waterfall by every private equity. And so what's actually interesting about that, the most effective thing that private equity did for being good stewards of the environment is setting up waterfalls like that. Because if there's an environmental problem, because every time we sell an asset, right, we get a full environmental review by the buyer, and generally the buyer's public, so it's a pretty rigorous exam. If there's an environmental problem and 10% gets whacked out of the purchase price, it actually disproportionately hits management teams because they're in the higher splits. So the boots on the ground folks, the management team, private equity as a general rule had a really good environmental record because of that incentive. And so I think there was actually less of a problem on ESG, but there's no question we weren't very good as an industry in terms of tallying up statistics, feeding data back to people so that they could quantify it. Because at the end of the day, everybody has a boss, right? And the investor has to go report to the CIO. If it's a state pension plan, they've got to report to the governor, lieutenant governor, whoever the comptroller of the state, whoever the case may be. And so we didn't do a very good job on educating folks, and it allowed the ESG stuff to hit. And I'll just give one example of that. I mean, why we kept the ingredients to fracs and frac fluids secret for so long is just beyond me. It's water, it's sand, it's the same acid we use in Diet Coke. I'm not saying that's good for you, but we at least drink it Diet Coke. It's a little bit in the way of antibiotics that we all take daily. And then what's the thickening agent? I always want to call it. Yeah. And and I mean, they put that in ice cream, right? So there was nothing harmful in that, but we kept it secret because we felt like there was a competitive advantage of my frac fluid versus their frac fluid, when really if we had told everybody, here's what it is, here are the ingredients, let's all drink it, it tastes bad, but we can all drink it, it won't cause anything. I think we could have done a lot better job, because as I always tell people, fracking is not new. The John Wilkes Booth, the actor that killed Lincoln, you know where he actually made his money? Because he wasn't a very good actor and he didn't get paid a lot for doing that. He actually fracked oil wells. He threw dynamite down oil wells and that was the rudimentary fracking they were doing way back then. So we've been fracking wells forever.
Well, the aspect that you brought up, you said education, but it's linked to public relations, because obviously in the oil field, a flare, whether it's smoking or not, a spill, that is just such a visual presentation that works against the oil industry. And then, like you say, the lack of data that exists out there, we've made so many improvements, but if you can't have a story that's documentable, it makes it very hard to go and present that to the public or present that to Congress, because then all of a sudden you're just being self-serving as an oil industry.
Yeah, I mean, think about it and go back to my earlier comment about a lottery ticket. If you hold a lottery ticket and it hasn't paid off yet, you're not really the best at public relations. You get worse at public relations when you actually hit the lottery ticket, right? and you're rich. So I think part of it's just that mentality that we as an industry have always had.
One more topic, and then we'll close up. I know you're active in a technology group, and you've already said that the need for technology, but dig into that a little bit more of how this is going to evolve, because you're seeing, BP and others trying to diversify into ESG, into technology. You're seeing money put into that, but is there any kind of avenue that you see more activity than others?
Yeah, and I joined the advisory board of Cottonwood Ventures, and people ought to go look them up. Cottonwood Ventures Partners, Google them and check out what they're doing. It's really interesting. When I first met those guys, they were telling me their whole thesis, and it was basically what I was saying earlier: a lot of automation, generally not hardware, more software type driven applications, big, huge need in the energy business to get more efficient, particularly when you're talking back office and the like. And they told me their whole thesis and showed me their pitch book. I pulled out a pitch book that I had written 22 years ago at Stevens when I was there. They literally could have lifted some of the pages out of that pitch book to put in their pitch book. And we all kind of giggled about how the industry just hasn't done much. But let me just give one example. Cottonwood guys are invested in a company that actually automates and helps make more efficient lifting and pumping type stuff. And they're using artificial intelligence and they're automating, because we all know how that works right now. You send the pumper out there to change the speed on the pump, come back, you monitor 5 days worth of data, you change it. I mean, that has been just logistically one of those really difficult things, because I think that's been underappreciated in the shale revolution of actually being able to find the right lift at the right point in the lives of these wells. My business partner, Mike Hines at Kane, world's greatest engineer, we'd go to meetings sometimes and he'd just walk out and go, oh my gosh, we could have figured that out in a week instead of 6 weeks. And so I think, along that line, every penny matters. I mean, being able to use artificial intelligence to monitor pump speeds, to be able to have the production engineer sitting in Houston, Texas, or Tulsa control it on their computer. I really do think that's the future, because we just have to do that sort of stuff if we want to be profitable as an industry. And ultimately, at the end of the day, that's our only path back to capital, like we were talking earlier.
And back to what I said about size, everything you just said yells that it needs to be consolidated, larger, so that you have a more consolidated footprint out in the field, and you can justify the wires that go to Houston. And so it seems like with that, then you create more of a have and have nots. You have the larger companies with all that technology and the lower margin or lower price point or cost point, and then you have everybody else.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And I think, it's been interesting since I joined the board of Cottonwood. I've actually talked to a lot of, and I say this with love, but quote unquote dinosaur type CEOs in the business who have been, hey, can we get together, go grab lunch? I want to hear what's going on with all this stuff. Because my young employees are restless. They want their technology and the like. So it's definitely on folks' radar screen.
Well, Chuck, I know you'd love to keep talking for a while, but we have run to our end. I have heard about a podcast that you're doing, uh, and I'm looking at the attendees. I bet there's some that want to get a hold of you. How would they reach you? Tell me about this podcast. I don't know. I don't think you're prepared for this, but give you a free thing on telling about pod since you're now Mr. Social Media. Talk about old dog, new tricks. Maybe this is saying that, yes, the oil industry can use technology if indeed Chuck Yates can do social media.
If Yates can do a pod, we're all in trouble. No, it's fun. The podcast is actually called Chuck Yates Needs a Job, and the website is chuckyatesneedsajob.com. I've edited the first pod. Hope to get it up. Probably take me a week or two to get the pod up. And I think it's just, I mean, those folks that know me, the bizarre ADD stuff that goes on in my head. That's what we're going to talk about. We'll tell jokes that we all used to laugh at when we were in 6th grade. We'll talk about some serious stuff. The first episode, my best friend James Fisher comes on, and we talk about, me getting fired from Kane. We talk about Fish getting fired from Opportune and just telling the family and things like that. So they always say the over under, or that when you study pods, 90% of podcasts get to 10 or fewer podcasts. So they put the over under on Chuck Yates Needs a Job at 0.7, that we'd probably kill each other in the middle of the pod and it wouldn't come out. We have one done, so we'll get that up online, and the hope would be, every 2 weeks get one up until somebody throws something at me. So chuckyatesneedsajob.com is the website, and then my Twitter handle is Nimble Fatty, Nimble NIMBLE Fatty PHATTY.
So they can reach you either way. And clearly, based on the name that you have, Chuck Yates Needs a Job, you've spent a lot of money on the marketing, on a marketing consultant for that.
Exactly.
Okay. It sounds like you got your money's worth on that, so good for you.
It's interesting. Actually, all of the really good names are taken these days. So if you go look at any of these consulting firms, they're basically some word that's dropped 1 or 2 letters. So Fish went to work for Essentia, and I'm like, you just couldn't afford the L in Essential, but literally all the good names are gone.
Very good. The challenges in today's world. Well, Chuck, thank you very much for your time. Attendees, I hope you enjoyed this. Again, pull up our YouTube channel if you want to hear Chuck's comments again or share it with someone. There's a lot of other good videos on there from a railroad commissioner, TCEQ, EPA, couple of congressmen, small cap public companies. So urge you, if you want to hear more of what people are thinking in the industry, to reach out. Thanks, everyone, and have a great day. Thank you, Chuck.